She was just a janitor, an obese single mother struggling to keep her sick son alive, invisible to everyone in the corporate tower. But one night, during a high-stakes board meeting, she dared to correct a billion-dollar mistake and stunned the entire room. The handsome millionaire CEO who once ignored her saw something no one else did: brilliance, faith, and unshakable courage. What began as humiliation turned into redemption, and the janitor became the heart of the company's greatest success. This is a story of faith, second chances, and how an obese single mother taught a handsome CEO the true meaning of strength, love, and grace. You won't believe how it ends. The glass walls of the Ellington and Hart Capitol boardroom held the city like a snow globe, Chicago glittering beyond, the river a dark ribbon under February sky. Inside, pressure tightened with every tick of the clock. Avery Sinclair, head of strategy, immaculate in ivory and steel, stabbed a manicured finger at the projection. "This financial analysis is a mess," she said, voice honeyed over ice. "We launched the IPO in 2 weeks, and our cash flow reads like a warning label." Around the table, directors cleared throats, feigned calm. At the end, Marcus Ellington watched without blinking. Tall, composed, the kind of billionaire who still listened more than he spoke. His cufflinks flashed when he folded his hands. "If there's an error, find it. Today," he said, measured as a metronome. Grace Delgado had chosen the wrong moment to open the door. The mop handle nudged the jamb. The yellow bucket squeaked across marble. She paused, heat rising in her cheeks. The badge on her chest read "Custodial." The linen shirt pulled at her soft frame. The overnight shift left half moons under her eyes. She'd meant to hit the corridor, not crash the top floor of the tower. "Ma'am," she whispered, ready to retreat. Avery's smile barely moved. "We're in the middle of something important." Grace should have closed the door. She should have kept her gaze on the floor like she'd trained herself to do. But the numbers on the screen, columns for revenue, expenses, working capital, hooked her feet in place. The model flickered like a bad memory she could still fix. She felt it the way musicians feel a wrong note, inside the ribs. "You've counted depreciation twice," she said before she could stop herself. Her voice sounded too loud, the kind that gets you fired. A dozen heads snapped toward the woman with the mop. Avery rose halfway, porcelain anger cracking the glaze. "Do you know finance? Leave. Now." Grace swallowed and took one step back, bracing for the shame. Then Marcus Ellington lifted a hand. Quiet. Decisive. "Ms. Sinclair." Avery's jaw worked, but she lowered herself into the chair. Marcus turned to Grace. "You said depreciation is counted twice. Show me." Her throat tightened. She hadn't used a whiteboard in years. Not since she'd stopped being a senior analyst and started bleaching coffee stains out of conference room carpet. Not since hospital bills for her little boy, Noah, became a second job, and then the only job that mattered. Not since her husband left on a Tuesday and never called back. Grace set the mop against the wall and willed her hands not to shake. "May I?" she asked, voice shrinking. Marcus gestured to the board. "Please." The marker felt familiar, a strange mercy. "You've got COGS and OPEX here," she said, drawing clean boxes, the rhythm returning like a hymn half remembered. "Then you adjust EBITDA for working capital. But in the capital, adjustments, here. You've pulled in depreciation again as if it were a cash charge. It flows through once in OPEX and again in the adjustment. That double count suppresses operating cash, makes the burn look worse than it is." Silence took the room by the shoulders. Avery's eyes narrowed. That's a bold claim from someone paid to mop floors. Grace flinched. She felt every word, heavy as coins, drop into the bucket beside her. But she kept writing, circling the two numbers like knots in a rope. Your DNA line is already non-cash. It shouldn't drain working cash again. If you back it out here, your runway extends. Your free cash flow flips positive in Q3 instead of Q4. You save the deal. Ethan, the lead analyst, went pale. Oh God, he breathed, and began hunting through his laptop with frantic keystrokes. Marcus stood. He didn't pace. He never needed to. He studied the board, then the woman who had written on it. How do you know this? Grace's mouth went dry. She could say Wharton and a decade in modeling rooms where the nights outnumbered the mornings. She could say she used to teach juniors how to reconcile cash like a second language. But her mind flashed instead to Noah, 7 years old, feverish and brave, whispering, Mama, you're the hero in my picture. She heard her own prayer from that same dawn, whispered over sink water and cold coffee. Lord, give me strength for what I can't see. I used to do this, she said softly, before my son got sick. Avery's laugh was glass-breaking. Tragic. Irrelevant. Marcus's gaze flicked toward Avery. Just a fraction. Just enough. He turned back to Grace. What's your name? Grace Delgado. Grace, he said, as if testing the feel of it. Would you erase and rebuild the flow as it should be? She nodded, the smallest motion, and started over. The room leaned in. Her lines were crisp, her labeling exact. She threaded the statements together like beads on a cord. Income to cash, cash to debt, debt to equity. When she capped the pen, no sound followed. Marcus looked at Ethan. Is she right? Ethan swallowed. Yes, sir. His voice cracked. She's absolutely right. Avery's color rose high and bright. So the custodian gets lucky once. We need days to... No, Marcus said. We need humility. He turned to Grace. Thank you. Heat flooded Grace's face. I'm sorry for interrupting, she said, already reaching for the mop like a shield. It won't happen again. Marcus's mouth softened at the corner. I hope it does. Avery's chair scraped. We cannot, seriously, take guidance from someone unqualified. Grace gathered the bucket handle. Every instinct screamed at her to flee. Down elevators, down corridors, into the anonymous places where no one says your name. But another voice, older and gentler, rose beneath the panic. You are seen. Be brave. She lifted her chin, steady now. I'm not asking you to trust me, she said, meeting Avery's eyes, then Marcus's. Trust the work. Marcus nodded once. A verdict. Reset the model with Ms. Delgado's correction, he said to the team. And Ms. Delgado, please wait outside. I'd like a word. Grace pushed the bucket into the hallway, heart hammering, breath too loud in her ears. She pressed her palm to the cool window, the city smeared with river light. Her phone buzzed. A photo from her sister, Mara, of Noah holding up a crayon drawing. 3 figures, hands linked. Beneath them, in wobbly letters, Mom, me, Hope. Grace closed her eyes, whispering, Thank you, Jesus, to the quiet corridor. Behind the door, the rich and the certain rearranged their numbers. Out here, a woman with a mop stood very still and felt heaven tilt, just a little, toward her. Grace waited in the hall with the mop handle tucked against her shoulder, like an oar. The doors opened. Executives spilled out in low murmurs, eyes flicking past her as if a miracle had unfolded, and they couldn't afford to see its source. Avery Sinclair paused just long enough to let a slow, bright smile skim across Grace's face, polite as a blade, then disappeared toward the elevators. Marcus Ellington stepped out last. The hallway's downlights silvered the edges of his suit. "Ms. Delgado," he said, voice pitched for privacy. "Do you have 5 minutes?" Grace's pulse jittered. "Yes, sir." "In my office, then." His office overlooked the river and the winter sun sliding off glass. He gestured to a seat. Grace hovered, uncertain about damp shoes and dignity. He nodded as if to say both could sit. She lowered herself, careful, hands folded. "I'm not interested in embarrassing anyone," Marcus said. "Least of all you. But your correction saved us hours. Maybe the deal." Grace studied a spot on the carpet where the city's light pooled. "I didn't mean to interrupt." Interruption is a word people use when truth arrives unscheduled. He let that sit. "Your background?" The room went quiet enough to hear the HVAC breathe. Grace could have lied small, some accounting classes, and slipped back into blessed invisibility. But something steadier lifted her chin, the old verse she'd learned when she was 19 and invincible. "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days." "I used to be a senior financial analyst at Stonebridge," she said. 10 years. Cash flow was my lane." She almost smiled. "Then my son got sick. I needed steadier hours, less travel. I took what I could get." Marcus did not flinch. He didn't rush into sympathy or solutions. He just listened, the way men do who understand time is the only real currency. "How is your son?" "Brave," she said, and the word filled her. "He has asthma that turns mean in winter, fevers, ER visits sometimes. He's 7, he draws superheroes." "What's his name?" "Noah." Marcus nodded once. "We're 2 weeks out. Our model needs to be rebuilt, carefully, quietly. I'd like you to consult nights after your shift. Temporary. 3 weeks. We'll pay you fairly, and we'll bring you in through facilities so we don't spook a board already skittish about optics." He opened a leather folio, slid a crisp sheet across the desk. "And we'll make a donation to the children's clinic on the south side in Noah's name, if you'll let us." Grace stared at the page as if the letters might smudge and disappear. Money had become a math she hated. Groceries or copays, rent or the inhaler that didn't get covered. This offer felt like light breaking through blinds. "Sir," she said, the syllable small and raw, "why me?" "Because the work is what it is no matter who carries it." He gave a rueful half-smile. "And because you were brave in a room that punishes bravery." Grace blinked hard. I'd need a quiet place to work." "Take the small office on 39. The one facing the brick wall, not the river. No one goes there. We'll badge you in." She folded the paper with fingers that wouldn't obey, then stopped herself and smoothed it flat again. "Mr. Ellington, I'm a woman of faith. I pray before I touch anything important. If that's a problem, it isn't," Marcus said simply. "Do it your way." Avery met them in the corridor when Grace left. She stood at an elegant angle, arms crossed just so. "We're really doing this?" she asked Marcus, bright with disbelief. Hiring the custodian to fix what our Ivy team couldn't? We're hiring the best person we have, Marcus said. If that unsettles you, let it. Avery's smile whitened. Optics are not a trifle. The board expects rigor, not charity. This isn't charity, Marcus said, calm enough to make the air cooler. It's stewardship. That night, while Chicago pressed its shoulder against the windows, Grace clocked out of custodial and badged into 39. The small office hummed with fluorescent fatigue. A spare desktop waited. On the wall, a whiteboard stood clean as a chapel wall before first service. Grace set her phone face up beside the keyboard. A photo of Noah in a red hoodie smiled back, front teeth missing, eyes ablaze. She exhaled and bowed her head. Lord, she whispered, if this is you opening a door, steady my hands. Keep Noah safe. Help me honor what I've been given. She didn't need coffee after that. The prayer woke her like a power source. She pulled the raw exports, GL dumps, unit economics, renewal cohorts, and began the slow work of untangling. The model was a woven thing, every stripe threaded through 3 others. An error in inventory timing hid under a mislabeled macro. A deferred revenue bucket had been treated like realized cash. She rebuilt, layer by layer, reconciling statements, checking every bridge twice. When she flagged an assumption, she scribbled a note in the margins. Why this now? When she fixed a link, she wrote, Return to source. Near 2 a.m, a cup appeared beside her elbow, steam curling from the lid. Grace startled and turned. Marcus stood in the doorway, tie loosened, a laugh tucked at the corner of his mouth. You look like a surgeon mid-operation, he said. I'm trying not to make new mistakes while I fix the old ones. That's most of leadership, he said. He glanced at the drawing taped to her monitor. Noah as a caped stick figure labeled Mom's Hero. Good taste in art, he added, softer. Grace followed his gaze. Pride and ache moved through her like weather. He thinks I can fix anything, she said. Maybe he's right. Maybe he needs glasses. The joke surprised her. It surprised Marcus more. He laughed, a low, ordinary sound, and it humanized him more than philanthropy ever could. Footsteps clicked in the hall, staccato, purposeful. Avery appeared, perfume arriving half a second before she did. Her eyes took in the coffee, the whiteboard, Grace's badge glowing green at the door. Burning the midnight oil with the help? She said, tone featherlight. How quaint. Grace's grip tightened on the dry erase marker. Marcus didn't take the bait. Ms. Sinclair, meet Ms. Delgado, our night consultant. She'll be presenting to me and legal by Friday. Avery's lashes swept down, up. To you? Not to finance? Her smile sharpened. We're skipping the people whose job it is to know. We're accelerating, Marcus said. Rigor comes next. Avery tilted her head, studying Grace the way buyers study fabric, checking for flaws, stretch, resale value. Do try not to embarrass the firm, she said, already turning. Grace let the door close on the perfume and the click of heels. Her hand trembled once, small as a sparrow shiver, and went still. She looked at the spreadsheet, at the knot of numbers she was untying. She looked at Noah's drawing. She looked, last, over her shoulder, up and outward, as if something above the brick wall could still see river and sky. Okay, she whispered into the hum of the lights. Let's feed 5,000 with a lunch pail. And then she worked. The city outside Ellington Tower was frozen steel and neon, but on the 39th floor, warmth glowed from a single desk lamp. Grace leaned over her laptop, eyes red from days of double shifts. The air smelled of coffee and dry markers. Every formula she corrected felt like a prayer answered. Every cell that balanced was another breath for her son. By the third week, she had rebuilt the model from the ground up, error by error, bone by bone. Her notes covered the walls. Integrity before polish, truth before optics. It was nearly midnight when Marcus appeared again, coat over one arm, his face tired, but peaceful. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her work. You should go home, Grace. She rubbed her temples. If I stop now, I'll forget where I left off. These reconciliations are like threads. Pull one wrong, and the whole tapestry unravels. He smiled faintly. You talk about numbers like they're living things. They are, she said softly. They tell the story of people who build, who risk, who try. She hesitated. And sometimes, who fall. Marcus stepped closer, studying the whiteboard where she'd written her son's name inside a small heart. Do you ever regret leaving finance? Grace paused, hands folded on the keyboard. I regret the fear that made me believe I didn't belong anymore. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. When Noah got sick, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. But it turns out, love, real love, teaches you what matters more. He looked at her for a long time. You remind me why I started this company. Grace blinked. And why's that? Because money should serve purpose, not pride, Marcus said. I lost sight of that somewhere between the headlines and the stock price. The silence between them softened, no longer awkward, almost sacred. Then the door burst open. Avery Sinclair stormed in, high heels like gunshots. Sir, are you aware the janitor's model is circulating internally? Someone leaked her work. It's gone viral across the analyst teams. Marcus frowned. Leaked? Avery thrust a tablet at him. Everyone's talking about it. The custodian cash flow fix. They're calling it genius, but this is a nightmare for optics. Investors will think we're unprofessional, letting talent speak for itself, Marcus interrupted, tone even. Avery's nostrils flared. She's not qualified. She's not even staff. Grace rose, her palms damp. I never shared it. I just saved it to the shared drive. Exactly my point, Avery snapped. You don't know how things work here. Marcus's voice lowered to a warning calm. Ms. Sinclair, that's enough. Avery looked from him to Grace, disbelief melting into something uglier. She's playing you, she said, quieter now, venom laced with silk. The poor single mother act? The faith talk? Don't let sympathy cloud judgment. Grace's throat tightened, humiliation and prayer colliding inside her. But before she could speak, Marcus turned, eyes cold as marble. Avery, I built this company on merit. You may leave now before you prove you've forgotten what that means. Avery froze, lips trembling, then spun and left. The door clicked shut, leaving a silence that trembled. Grace's hands shook. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I can leave, Mr. Ellington. Marcus, he said. And no, you're not leaving. She exhaled, chest tight. Then why does this hurt like I did something wrong? Because humility always bruises before it heals, he said quietly. He picked up the tablet, studied the model again, and nodded. "Tomorrow, you'll present this to the board yourself." Grace froze. "No, I can't. They won't take me seriously." Marcus smiled. Not pity, but belief. "Then show them the work, Grace. Let it speak louder than prejudice." The next day, the same boardroom where she'd been dismissed now waited in silence. Grace stood at the head of the table, heart pounding under her modest blouse. Avery sat stone-faced in the corner. Marcus nodded once from his chair. Grace began. 2 weeks ago, this model predicted negative cash flow. That was a lie told by a spreadsheet. The truth is here. She clicked the remote. The charts shifted, lines bending upward like dawn after storm. Depreciation was double-counted. Inventory was mistimed. The business wasn't broken, just misunderstood. Her voice steadied. "I may not have your degrees, but I know something about rebuilding what's broken. I've done it with numbers, and with my life." For a long moment, no one moved. Then one of the senior partners leaned forward. "This," he said, voice hushed, "is the cleanest correction I've seen in 20 years." Applause rippled, hesitant, then growing. Even Avery couldn't meet her eyes. Grace blinked back tears. Marcus stood. "Ladies and gentlemen, the model stands. So does Ms. Delgado." That evening, as the city lights flickered awake, Grace knelt beside her son's bed. Noah slept soundly, curls against the pillow. She brushed a hand across his forehead, whispering, "We did it, baby. God made a way." The apartment was small, but it felt like a cathedral. She didn't see the skyline. She didn't see the check on her counter. She saw promise. Fragile, glowing, and real. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. "The board approved the model. You changed more than numbers today." Grace smiled through the tears. "No," she whispered to herself. "He did." And for the first time in years, she slept without fear. Spring crept into Chicago quietly. Soft rain on concrete, green edges returning to the riverbanks. At Ellington and Hart Capital, the IPO launched with a roar that could be heard on every business network. The numbers were flawless. The stock soared. Yet, while champagne flowed in the boardroom, Grace Delgado rode the train home, a brown paper bag of groceries on her lap, and her son's crayon drawing folded in her purse. She'd turned down the offer Marcus made that morning, a permanent position on the finance team. The money was generous, the office view dazzling, but her heart whispered not yet. "I have to be home when Noah wakes," she'd told him, "and when he's scared." Marcus hadn't argued. He'd only said, "Then we'll find another way." 3 days later, he called her back to the tower. Not as a janitor, not as a consultant, but as something new. The 39th floor conference room felt different now. Grace entered wearing the same thrifted gray blazer she'd worn to church interviews. Marcus and Avery were already there. Avery, pale but composed, kept her eyes on her notebook. "Grace," Marcus began, "this company owes you more than a bonus check. You saw something the rest of us missed, not just in the numbers, but in how we treat the people behind them." He glanced at Avery, then back to Grace. "You reminded me what leadership is supposed to look like." Grace smiled nervously. "I just did my job." Marcus shook his head. "You did your calling. There's a difference." He clicked a remote. A new proposal appeared on the screen. Second Chance Initiative. Underneath, a tagline read, for those rebuilding their futures. I want to start a program, Marcus said, for people like you, professionals who stepped away because life happened, single parents, caregivers, veterans, those written off by a system that worships perfection. He looked at her with quiet conviction. I want you to run it. Grace froze. Me? I don't have the credentials anymore. Or the time. You have something rarer, Marcus said. Faith, resilience, and the kind of wisdom that doesn't fit on a resume. For a moment, Grace thought of her son sleeping under hospital lights, of the mop bucket and long nights, of every whispered prayer that had ended in silence, until one finally didn't. She clasped her hands. If I do this, it has to help real people, not just polish our brand. Marcus smiled. Then you'll fit right in. Avery shifted in her seat. Her voice was careful now, stripped of venom. Ms. Delgado, for what it's worth, I was wrong about you. About a lot of things. Grace met her eyes, saw shame and humanity behind the mascara. We all learn the hard way, Grace said gently. Some of us just get more practice. Months passed. The Second Chance initiative bloomed from an idea into a movement. The company funded evening classes, mentorships, small business grants. Grace led it all from a modest office with a mural Noah had painted, a tree with deep roots and open hands. Every time a new participant walked through her door, Grace offered them coffee and a sentence she believed down to her bones. You're not starting over, you're starting forward. Avery volunteered twice a month, mentoring single mothers who wanted to re-enter finance. The two women grew into quiet friends, bonded by humility. And Marcus? He visited often, not to oversee, but to listen. His wealth had built towers, but this project, this grace-born thing, built something he'd never found before. Peace. One Sunday evening after church, Grace opened her door to find Marcus standing in the rain with a small box. He looked oddly nervous. Marcus, you'll catch cold out there. I figured this was worth the risk. He stepped inside, water dripping from his coat. It's not a gift, exactly. More like a partnership. She opened the box. Inside lay a small gold key and a folded note. Hope House, it read. A community center for single parents and kids battling chronic illness. Built with the first profits from the IPO. In your name. In Noah's honor. Grace pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. I can't. This should be yours. It already is, Marcus said softly. You made me see the kind of wealth that can't be traded on the exchange. Tears blurred her vision. You really believe God uses people like me? I think he prefers to, Marcus said. The dedication of Hope House drew a small crowd. Families, nurses, students. A choir sang softly in the corner. Noah, now healthier, held his mother's hand as she spoke at the podium. I used to think miracles looked like lightning, Grace said into the microphone, voice steady but shining. Now I know they look like people, ordinary people, who refuse to stop believing that love can rebuild anything. She looked at Marcus in the front row, at Avery wiping her eyes, at Noah waving his superhero drawing in the air. God didn't change my circumstances, she said. He changed my heart, and through it, my world. Applause rose, warm and thunderous. Marcus stepped forward, taking her hand. You rebuilt more than a model, Grace. You rebuilt us. Grace laughed through her tears. I just followed the math heaven gave me. He leaned closer. Then maybe heaven's been hiring you full time. That night, after the lights dimmed and the guests departed, Grace and Marcus stood by the glowing sign of Hope House. Rain fell soft as blessing. Do you ever wonder, he said quietly, what would have happened if you hadn't spoken up that day? Grace looked at him, her reflection haloed in the window light. I do, she whispered. And then I remember, faith doesn't wait for permission. They stood hand in hand, the city humming around them, the night alive with new beginnings. And somewhere deep in Grace's heart, she heard it again. The voice she'd prayed to through the darkest hours. Soft, steady, unmistakable. You are seen. You are chosen. You are home.